Hi, this is Clarissa with Sipology, and we have a fantastic selection of tea, teaware, and various other items. Currently, we are offering a huge 25% off sale with Christmas in July. Come check us out on Facebook at E.I.T.H.R. That's E.I.T.H.R.
State ascoltando il podcast E.I.T.H.R. con E.I.T.H.R.
So, let's start with the E.I.T.H.R.
Happy Friday, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy Decal here hosting the E.I.T.H.R. podcast from the GNS HQ here in Sacramento, California. How is everyone doing this evening? Glad you guys were able to find us here. I just want to thank you guys for being able to find us wherever you get your podcasts or wherever you're able to tune in from here. Do me a favor and make sure that you guys are able to follow us on the social media, Twitter or Instagram. Show some support at the E.I.T.H.R. at THEEITHR. That is the E.I.T.H.R. THEEITHR. So we'll go ahead and do that. Want to give a shout out to Rissa T Party. Couple nice products over there for us, different type of teas and things of that nature. And the Hot Box out there in OKC. I see y'all, man. I want to thank you guys for the support here on the podcast that I'm starting here. Episode number 21. Man, it's kind of crazy. Time flew by really, really fast. I appreciate everyone who has downloaded the podcast. I appreciate everybody who has given back to the podcast, feedback to the podcast, supporting the podcast. So I want to make sure that you guys get your respect and a round of applause. Appreciate that. Yep, because you guys are definitely the true MVPs of this. You're the reason why I make this happen. This is kind of like my verbal diary where I get to share with the rest of the world how everything goes in my life and kind of what's on my mind. So for those who are new to the E.I.T.H.R. podcast, again, it's a fairly new podcast, something that I was suggested by other people that I should do. This is kind of where I express my mind, where you get things from as best as possible, neutral perspective. I try to look at everything for every possible angle, so that way you see things from a method that you probably normally would never see in normal discussion with somebody. That way there's no yelling, there's no cussing, there's no name calling, so on and so forth. That's what we do here. We kind of give you a platform for you to hear a voice of calm and a voice as much possible sense as you could have when talking about some of the topics and issues that most of us don't really feel comfortable talking about on social media or just in general at the dinner table with family and friends. Also on the side note, if you guys are looking for another way to expand your brand, get your brand out there, you're more than welcome to contact GNS Promotions on Twitter or Instagram. Is the same handle. It's at GNS George Nancy Sam Promotions with an S at the end. And if you search for the Facebook page, it's just do the search for the GNS Promotions, again with an S at the end. And you can go ahead and hit us up there. That way we can go ahead and make some work happen for you to expand yourself in today's economy, because everyone's trying to do their best to save as much money, but at the same time maximize the return that they get. And you know, we do it the best we can with what we got, and to make sure we do that. So anyone who listens to the podcast, I like to start off with motivational words or suggestions. I never give advice. Never give advice. The reason why I never give advice is because some people don't take it. And when people take it, it doesn't work, usually because they don't apply it. And if they do apply it, they apply it the way they think you meant it versus how you said it. So I give suggestions on what somebody should do. Most of the time, it's either experience from me firsthand, or it's experience from someone that I trust and that has proven that it worked, and I pass it on to whoever is willing to apply and listen to it. So, drink water before you go to bed. I know. What happens is, as we drink water throughout the day, our bodies are typically upright. And when our bodies are upright, our kidneys don't necessarily get the water that it needs all the way through. So there's still some stuff that's in that needs to be filtered out. So when you drink and you lay down, kind of think of like a better term, think of an egg that's halfway filled with water, right? The top half of that egg obviously is still dry because the water is the bottom half. Simple physics, right? Gravity. But when you turn that egg perpendicular, then part of that kidney, if you will, gets some of the water that it needs to use to filter everything out. And so when you roll over and turn over, you kind of switch it around to the other half of the kidney that doesn't necessarily get the water that it should be getting. So yes, you have to get up and go to the bathroom more frequently than you probably want to. But it's also a great way for you to filter out stuff, and which also helps with weight loss. And sometimes there's stuff in your system that's preventing you from going to sleep. So by getting that filtered out of your body, you might be able to find your REM sleep a little bit faster and have a deeper sleep. So just a suggestion. Like I said, I do it. It is annoying, but I found out that, my pants are getting a little looser. So it helps. It helps. And any little bit you can to kind of, make the body function a little bit safer. We all should be for that. So what I want to talk about today is a couple of topics, actually. Before I get into the two that I'm really excited to talk about, I want to say this. The power of the microphone. The power of the microphone is extremely fragile, especially in today's world. It's extremely fragile because we live in a world where a lot of us get our information from social media. And now we're transitioning into a lot of people get their information from podcasts. So very few people take anything that they hear and run with it 100% with accuracy. But there are some parts of the country and some parts of the world where what they see or what they hear is what they believe. And so you have to make sure that if you're speaking information, the information that you're speaking is as accurate as it possibly can be. Again, what we do here at the E.I.T.H.R, we try to keep everything neutral right down the middle. That way it's not swayed more left, it's not swayed more right. And whenever I share information, I try to make sure that I say, this is what I read, this is what I heard, this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is what I believe. So that way people who are listening to the podcast, they're not necessarily taking what I'm saying as a fact, but more as a informed opinion. Because there are several thousand million uninformed opinions flying around on the internet and on our faces. And a lot of the discussion is people arguing other people's opinions. And most of the people agree with opinions. Well, opinion doesn't necessarily mean it's right. It just means that everyone else agrees with you. So that's not a fact. But the power of the microphone, man, you got to keep in mind that anything that you say, some people will hold on to that. So you have to be very cautious and very, very careful with your words. Golden State Warriors power forward Draymond Green, who has the fourth largest athlete podcast in the country, maybe the world, but in the country at least. He refers to podcasts as the new media. And so that's kind of get into a topic a little bit later, is the new media, where is old forms of media dying? And this new form of media, is it going to be the transition? Is this going to be the takeover? Is this, because let's face it, traditional news, that's where we went to find out what's going on in the world, whether it was political, athletics, comedy, entertainment. But now it's a little bit different. Like I said, we're going to probably get into that a little bit later. But I just wanted to make sure that I expressed to anybody, when you're listening to a podcast, do your best, man, to not take it with a grain of salt. Don't take it too seriously, but don't take it as a joke. Just take it as, okay, this is what I heard. This is what I'm learning. This is what is being told to me today. Because facts do change. It doesn't necessarily mean you were lied to. It just means that new information was discovered, kind of like with science. And a lot of people hold on to what they feel is the truth because they agree with it. And like I said, that gets a little tricky. So I just want to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page with that, because it's important to know. So let's go ahead and get into the topics that we got going on today, shall we? All right. So this is kind of there's a lot of scams going on in today, right now, especially with the way the economy is going. Everyone's trying to make their money. Everyone's trying to hustle, and I'm all about you hustling. I'm all about you doing whatever you got to do to make whatever you got going, so that way you can better yourself. As long as you're not hurting anybody else and you're not hurting yourself, you're good to go. But sometimes it does come at a price, and it does come at a cost, and it does come at a time where we all don't expect it. So here's what is one of the things I want you guys to look out for. Summer's here. It's hot, depending on where you are in the country, depending on where you are in the world. Gas prices are dipping. But that could change. And prices are starting to go up because of inflation. Even though the president has said he's going to change some tariffs when it comes to import-export with China, that does not necessarily make us safe when it comes to paying for services. And most of us don't carry cash anymore, right? Everything is debit or credit with the plastic. I know there's a lot of chipped cards, so you can kind of do Apple Pay or you can do the Touch Pay. But at gas stations, when you pay at the pump, and this has happened to me twice, at the gas station that's right here close to where I live, at times you have people, what they use is called skimmers. And what a skimmer is, at least that's a term that some people use, is a small device that you slide into the credit card slot. You cannot see it with the eye. And if you're looking at it, unless you know what to look for or how to look for it, you're not going to know it's there. So what they do is they slide it in there. So when you put your card in and pay at the pump, they're going to get your card information and they're going to get your PIN code. Now, most of this happens at gas stations super late at night / early in the morning when there's hardly anybody there. And the people might even look like or may even appear as if they're buying gas themselves. And they could be. But that could just be a front for them to put it in the gas station pump. So what I always do, I always pay my gas at with the cashier. Always go inside the cashier, because you have a greater chance of them not tampering with the debit or the credit card reader at the counter, because it's a clerk who's there, right? And if something like that does happen, it is easier to identify the person who did it because the camera right above the register, right? And then the gas station can start seeing a pattern if a certain person comes in frequently, or if it's a certain cashier employee who is on shift whenever this happens. Then they'll have a record of it. Now, most of the time when you go and you report this to your credit card company, you can dispute it, you'll get your money back. But what they'll do is they'll cancel your card and you have to wait for a new card in the mail. So the inconvenience is you'll lose X amount of dollars until you figure it out when you look at your statement. You may possibly get refunded, but that can take anywhere from a couple of business days to a couple of business weeks. So you gotta wait for that. Then at that very moment, your card is canceled. It doesn't work, so you have to wait for your bank to reissue you. It can take 7 to 10 business days. And for everyone who is unaware, business days do not count weekends. Weekends are not a business day. Holidays do not count as a business day. Majority of us are aware of that, but there's some of us who are like, really? So if you call on a Thursday, Friday is 1, Monday is 2. Well, Monday to Tuesday is 2, and it kind of goes from there. So just be aware of that, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, you're never going to know until you check your statement, and it sucks. But like I said, everyone's out there trying to make a hustle. Everyone's out there trying to make money. Everyone's out there trying to do what they can. I get it. I understand it. But for those of us right now who are trying to do as much as we can with the little money that we have as surplus, that's very, very important for you guys to know. Like I said, some of us don't even check the statements of our bank account. With my bank, I get an alert on my phone. So when a transaction goes through, it will tell me, did you make this transaction? Or sometimes I just check my account daily since it's happened to me so many times just to see what transactions has went through, so I can kind of keep a quote unquote throwback term checkbook so I can balance everything out. But yeah, just make sure about the gas station thing. I mean, like I said, if you want to take that risk, you're more than welcome to. If you have a gas station that you always go to and nothing's really happened to you per se, and you feel comfortable with that, I respect it. But at least just wanted to put that out there for you, ladies and gentlemen. That some of these gas stations, man, they're targets, and who knows if this is something that's being a tandem with the cashier and someone who works there. Just want to make sure you're not being an easy target. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, this is sports related, so this is probably going to turn a lot of you off, especially those who aren't really into sports. But a lot of conversations people have when it comes to sport. GOAT. You've heard that term so many damn times. And I remember growing up, the term GOAT had a different meaning than it does now. Now we kind of just throw it around whenever we see somebody who have a good game, right? And this term usually is hyper used in sports like football or basketball. Most people call a player that they like a GOAT. Some use it tongue-in-cheek. Some are being sarcastic. But like I said, some people hear that word and it triggers them because, it's oversaturated in the terms of sports. You have to ask yourself, what's the difference? Oh, for those who don't know what GOAT is, it's GOAT, which stands for greatest of all time. Okay. Richard Sherman, who played for the Seattle Seahawks, and he played for the San Francisco 49ers. And I believe he went to the Buccaneers. I think he's retired now. But he had a very good point. He changed the acronym. He said it should be GOTE, which stands for greatest of this era. Because a lot of people, whenever we discuss greatest of all time, majority of the folks only consider the time they know. So greatest of all time is from the beginning of the sport till today, till now. So whenever you're discussing that, it's very tricky, at least with someone like myself. So whenever you have conversations with someone talk about the GOAT, one thing I always ask somebody is really simple. What do you define GOAT by? What matters to you? Is it championships? And a lot of people answer is who has the most rings, right? Who has the most trophies? Who has the most gold medals? Who has the most records sold? right? Who's more gold? Who's more platinum? Who's most streaming? Things of that nature. The definition of GOAT to me is who is the most influential. It's almost like a tree, right? What player has the players around him or her improving, getting better, to when that player goes someplace else, they improve that team and kind of do the same exact thing. It's a very intangible statistic, and not many people think of stuff like that. But whenever you have a conversation with someone, like I said, and you have that question, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to bring up championships. Okay. And one of the hot topics is making comparisons of, one of the greatest people that people believe to be the greatest compared to someone else that the world is currently compared to be the greatest. And so that's the whole water cooler debate. So when you get into that conversation, someone will bring up, like LeBron James. Majority of people have heard of LeBron James. So they'll bring up LeBron James is ranked X compared to someone like Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan is the gold standard when it comes to championships and the greatest of all time in professional basketball, in the NBA. But in my opinion, Michael Jordan is sincerely, completely, totally overhyped. He's overhyped. And I'll explain what it is that I mean right after this.
Yo, what up, folks? This is Rodney Farrell, the CEO of Farrell Development Group, and you're listening to the E.I.T.H.R podcast, hosted by E.I.T.H.R. Let's get it.
Like I said, Michael Jordan is completely, sincerely, totally overhyped. I'm not saying he's overrated. He's overhyped. And what I mean by that is any and everything that is compared to in the NBA is Michael Jordan. And listen, I grew up watching Jordan. I understand. There weren't too many athletic players couldn't do what Jordan did, especially during that era. And I totally 100% get it. But the difference between then versus after him or before him, there really weren't many people for him to model, so he kind of set the tone. So a lot of people hold on to that. But when it comes to the greatest of all time, no, he's not. In my opinion, he's not. He is the greatest scoring guard or the greatest number 2 guard of all time. You could say that. But the greatest player of all? No. There was a discussion on a Bay Area sports station, and they brought up a very good point. I want to say it was Rick Barry, if I remember his name correctly, Hall of Fame, one of the top 75 players in the history of the NBA. And he made a very valid point. He says, in order to be the best player at something, you have to have played all 5 positions to be the best player. If you only played at one position, then you can be the best player at that position. People remember, Magic Johnson, right? Some of us remember Magic Johnson for some of his off-the-court antics. But there's a lot of us who remember Magic Johnson for playing in the NBA with the Lakers. 6'9" out of Michigan State. He played all 5 positions when he was with the Lakers. Now, again, power forwards and centers were like 6'6", 6'8". Very few 7-footers back then, right? Quote unquote. So I understand the skill set was differently. The athleticism was different. But you also had different game. the game wasn't the same back then. The game was more power. The game was more strength. It was more tough. It was more aggressive. It wasn't as finesse. You didn't have to have the skill set. Now I guarantee you that if you were to take some of those players from back then and put them in today's world where the training is different, a lot of them could adapt to it. That just wasn't the game at that time. So when he made that point about having to play all 5 positions, it literally made me say, that's an interesting point. That's a very valid point. So I don't see him as the greatest player in the NBA for 2 reasons. The other reason, people always would go to championships. Okay, LeBron James has been to 8 or 9 finals, NBA finals, and he's won 4 of them. So he has 4 NBA championships. Michael Jordan is 6-0. So a lot of memes and posts and comments and threads and discussions are, LeBron James is nowhere near Michael Jordan because Jordan has never lost a finals game. Jordan has never been in a game 7. Jordan has never had to be in a deciding game series. Jordan has never been in a situation where he's had to pull his team up from behind or be eliminated. All those things are true. But if we're counting championships, Jordan only has 6. And here's where I come from, where people talk about the greatest of all time. They only count their time that they recognize till now. Oakland, California's very own Bill Russell, who played for the Boston Celtics back in the 60s, he has 11. But when you bring up Bill Russell, everybody's quick to say that doesn't count. It's like, why doesn't Bill Russell count? Why does 11 championships, 11-0, why does 11-0 not hold weight over 6-0? Because nobody watched Bill Russell play. That's the reason. And so then my discussion with these people is, if you've never seen Bill Russell play, but you've only seen Michael Jordan play, and a lot of them were young people, you can't say of all time. You can only say of your time. He's the greatest of your time. Because Bill Russell was before me. But if you go back in the history of it, 11 beat 6. Simple as that. Another thing when it comes to people, when it comes to conversations about who's the greatest and who's not, nobody ever wants to admit that the teammates have a lot to do with the person's success as well, right? Who you played with. And everybody always wants to talk about the era in when you played. Listen, today's era of basketball is a lot more athletic and is a lot more faster. Okay, I will give you that. You take some of those players back then, it would take some adjusting to move as quick as some of these people. I will give you that. But if you want to compare apples with apples, take a prime player back then and a prime player now, put them on the court. Steph Curry is, if everyone knows who Steph Curry is, he's the greatest basketball shooter in the history of the NBA. And he's playing now. We are living in history, right? But the 3-point shot in the NBA did not exist until 1979. So back then, that 3-point didn't have the same effect as it did in 2022, right? So when you're having these comparisons of who's the greatest, not everyone wants to take in consideration. Gilbert Arenas, who played in the NBA, he says, when I look at the players in the past, I kind of think of like a Ferrari, right? That Ferrari back in the 80s and the 70s, it was a nice Ferrari. It was a beautiful Ferrari. But compared to the Ferraris of today, that Ferrari is trash. Why would I want a Ferrari from 1988 when I can have a Ferrari of 2022? It was smoke, that Ferrari, which is true. It's more athletic. It's lighter. It has a lot more horsepower than the old school Ferrari. But the old school Ferrari is way more durable. It's easy to repair. And it would last you a lot longer than the new one because it's cheaply built. That's my argument to that. That's how I see it. Going into football, again, we're talking about sports. Tom Brady, San Mateo, California's very own, quote unquote Foster City. He has 7 Super Bowl rings, the most of anybody in the history of the NFL. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. That's the argument. And again, no, he's not, in my opinion. Because if you're going to say that Jordan is better than anybody else because he's never lost in a finals, then you have to hold Tom Brady to the same argument because he's lost twice in the Super Bowl, both to Eli Manning and the New York Giants. You want to know who has never lost in the Super Bowl? Joe Montana. Listen, I am a Raider fan, so both of these QBs suck to me. But it's a sports suck because Joe Montana played for the 49ers. Tom Brady played for the Patriots. It was a fumble, and Tom even admitted it. And now he played for the Buccaneers, which any Raider fan hates both of those squads, all 3 total. But Montana has never lost in the Super Bowl. He's 4-0. So even though 7 is greater than 4, simple mathematics, Montana never lost. He doesn't know what it's like to lose in the Super Bowl. So how can Tom Brady be the greatest over him, yet Bill Russell not be the greatest over Michael Jordan? Right? If LeBron James gets 7 championships, or if Steph Curry gets 7 championships, is he now no longer greater than Jordan because he lost in the finals to Cleveland back in 2016? All these conversations are going to be subjective, but I'm the kind of person where I'm going to ask questions to find out what kind of discussion am I going to get into with you. I have no problem discussing with it, but I'm not going to argue logic with emotion because emotion ain't got to have sense. Emotions sometimes don't even make sense. So if I'm going to argue logic to your emotion, I'm never going to win because you're always going to pull out how you feel this is right. And I can't prove how you feel is wrong because that's how you feel. And that's a loophole or a scapegoat a lot of people have when you're having discussions, especially about sports. So when it comes to that, man, I'm just the kind of person, like I said, you know, if your math is the same as my math, 7 is greater than 4, talking about Tom Brady and Joe Montana. But 0 is always going to be greater than 2 when it comes to how many losses you took. If Jordan's the greatest because he's never lost, Montana's still the greatest because he's never lost. Simple as that. But when it comes to players, again, it's one of the questions someone asked was Peyton Manning. Some of you guys may have heard the name. Peyton Manning. I'm the kind of person, I would rather have Peyton Manning as my quarterback than Tom Brady as my quarterback. Now, granted, Brady had an overall record versus Manning in the NFL. He has more Super Bowls than Manning in the NFL. But where I differentiate between the two, you've never heard of any player leaving Tom Brady and going to another team and making them better. But you have had players who played with Peyton Manning and they've made the team better. So it's kind of one of those situations where I'd rather go with the QB who, now again, I never met either one of them. So Tom could possibly be just as equivalent as Peyton Manning. I never had a conversation with him, never met the man, never seen him in a grocery store. So this is my opinion. But from what I observed after watching the NFL, Peyton was a little more personable with his guys, where Tom seemed a little more standoffish. Now, I will give Tom Brady this credit. He is a team-first guy. He's never been one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's always redid his contracts where the team had more money. so they can sign quality players and bring in players to build around him. I will give him credit for that. Where a lot of players in today's world, and particularly the quarterback, they take all the money they can, leaving the team not much money to build around them. Dr. Dre, one of the greatest producers of my time, posed a question, and that question is really simple. It says, do you want to make money or do you want to leave a legacy? Because not necessarily can you do both. You can't leave a legacy if you're chasing the money, but you can make money if you're leaving a legacy. And I think a lot of people get the two confused, thinking they're one of the same, when obviously they're not. So when it comes to stuff like that, I'm very passionate when it comes to knowing your audience and wasting time, because I don't want to waste your time having a conversation. And more importantly, I don't want to waste my time wasting your time. So that's that when it comes to Michael Jordan being overhyped when people do basketball analogies, and Tom Brady being oversold when it comes to his 7 Super Bowl championships. Again, those losses should knock Brady underneath Manning, just like those losses knock everyone else underneath Jordan, despite Bill Russell having damn near twice as many championships as him. Now I want to get back to the new the new media comment that I made earlier about podcasts and stuff like that. Listen, there are a lot of media outlets that their bread and butter was to bring us news, right? Breaking news, first heard here, this, that, and the other, so on and so forth. Now it's almost as if we're in a situation, ladies and gentlemen, where the athlete breaks the news first. The athlete breaks the news first. And that can't be good for news outlets. That can't be good for, like newspapers. Well, not newspapers ain't really around anymore, are they? But it can't be a good thing when it comes down to wherever you normally get your news from, like your CNNs or your Foxes or your MSNBCs or your Wall Street Journals, right? That no longer can be something that's reliable, because again, I no longer have to wait for the news to break it. All I got to do now is wait for the athlete to tell me. And when the athlete tells me, oh, cool, now I know. Because I see it all the time. Like, on Twitter, right? So-and-so gets a new contract. The athlete would post, finally got my bag, right? And they'll have the emojis or whatever. And everyone knows what that means. They kind of speak that code. Or the team will put out a tweet. Congratulations to D.Cal on his podcast being syndicated and receiving an X amount of dollar deal with these affiliates across the country, right? And then within 24 hours later, Channel 4 breaks the news. D.Cal in Sacramento, California, signed a deal with, it's like you guys are 3 hours too late. It's almost like a meme breaks out and someone tells you about the news and someone's like, yeah, I already saw the meme about that. It's like, damn. It's like we knew before the person. And even sometimes when it comes to negative news, right? Sometimes businesses will tell you via a tweet that, this adjustment is coming, or these changes are happening, or you no longer need your services. Like I remember during the pandemic, gosh, what business was it? I don't remember who it was, but somebody, it's on the tip of my tongue, I just can't say. Somebody did a Zoom with like a group of their employees, and let the employees know that they all were terminated. Once that hit Twitter, it was like, I don't know how many hours before the news outlets got it. So you have a lot of people with sources and partnerships and relationships with agents and reporters and beat writers. Are they now behind? Are they now behind the 8 ball because of social media? It's almost like a gift and a curse. Like I said, it's Elon Musk in the Twitter acquisition. He dropped it. He stopped it. It's done. I didn't hear about that on the news. Saw about that online. Social media. Right? And by the time it got to my news outlet, I shared it, but it was like, damn, this is old hat. Because once you see it on social media, it's almost like you're no longer interested in watching it on television anymore. Or you're no longer really interested in reading the article anymore because the person who was involved already broke that news. Right? So is that a bad thing for how we get our information? I mean, yeah, we're getting it from the source. We're getting it directly from the horse's mouth. But what if the horse is talking out of their ass? What if there's information being leaked that's not supposed to be leaked? Is that detrimental to a business? Is that going to be detrimental to how we receive our news? Again, like I said in the beginning, there's a lot of people who live in small rural towns who don't have access to big cities. So social media is their only outlet, right? The news is their only outlet. So the tricky part, I think, with this new media thing is not everyone understands the tone. Not everyone understands your sarcasm. Not everyone understands the flippant comments. I think that's part of the reason why the podcast was important for me, so you could hear the tone of what I'm saying and allow me to explain what I'm saying, again, with the tone, so you can translate that to, okay, this is what it is. This is what it sounds like. Because most of the time when we get the information, we hear it with the voice that happens to be reading it. Whatever that voice sounds like, that's how we emotionally react to it, right? So with this new media thing, like I said, you got Draymond with a podcast. You have all these athletes with podcasts, which is beautiful. But again, is it hurting the industry of traditional news? Are some of you guys okay with that? Are you fine with that? Again, podcasts are us expressing our opinion, is us expressing what we think, is us expressing how we feel. Doesn't necessarily mean it's true unless it's talking to the person specifically. But even then, you got to ask yourself, is this person being genuine? Are they being flippant? You're getting it directly from them, but is it one of those sources where even they're being reliable? Because someone can spread a lie with a podcast, right? Someone can give misinformation with a podcast. I guess the whole point is just, again, to be cautious and be wary and be safe, because I'm accustomed to news outlets vetting their sources, who they talk to, and leaving, I guess you can say, references of where they got their information from, so you can check the references. Again, the good thing about a podcast is if you're getting it directly from the person, him or herself, you don't have to worry about the source being vetted, because it's them. But then I also know that a lot of people, I'm not going to say any certain athletes, some of them like to stir the pot because they're so insecure on social media, they have to keep their name in the news, right? And sometimes it takes one bad apple and that spoils the bunch. So is social media the new media? Is podcasts the new media? I think it is. Which goes back to those of us with podcasts, man, we got to be super diligent with whatever it is that we say, especially when we're talking about a third party situation. Like that's extremely important, right? At least to someone with ethic and someone with moral. I don't know about anybody else on here, but I'm that kind of person. I want to make sure that, if I give the information, it's as accurate as possible. And if I don't know, I'm going to be like, I don't know how this works. I'm going to look into it. I'm going to read into it. But it's the world is definitely changing, man. The world is definitely changing, and it's interesting to watch it turn. It's definitely interesting to watch the world turn and see how far we've come, and in some situations to see how far we still have to go. Another thing I want to talk about is when it comes to conversations with people. I tweeted this out. A majority of the conversations never reach a level of communication due to people not responding, but rather reacting to each other. Points are lost as well as to clear their lens. Points are lost as well as the clear lens or perspective. When you see people having a conversation on social media, no one's listening or paying attention to what they're saying. Majority of the people, what they're doing is they're just waiting for their turn to tell you what they think and how they feel. No one's really understanding what it is. Very few times have I ever had a conversation with somebody and that conversation went, okay, I see your point. Okay, I was misunderstood. I was misinformed. I learned to do this myself. And I think a lot of folks feel that if I acknowledge you are right, I am wrong, it makes me look ignorant. It makes me look stupid. It makes me look like I don't know anything. If I'm wrong about this, what else am I wrong about? And so it takes a certain type of maturity, I feel, think and believe, for folks to sit back and say, all right, you know what? I didn't know that. Or thank you for informing me about that. Thank you for putting me up on that. I appreciate you telling me that. Because the saying goes, correct a wise man, he would appreciate you. Correct a fool, and he'll hate you for it. So you got to understand how many fools we have in our lives. And if you choose to waste your time on that, you're more than welcome to. But everyone should know the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, yet expecting a different result. So when it comes down to having these conversations with people, you kind of got to know the temperature. Again, going back to the sports topic I talked about, I ask questions. What is it that you consider to be fill in the blank? Okay, now I know how to approach this conversation. Okay, now, and that doesn't mean that my perspective is going to be different now, or I'm going to give you a different answer. No. What that means for me is if I understand how you perceive fill in the blank to be viewed, I know how to approach you with my perspective. I know how to address it in a way that's easier for me to get my point across in a way that you'll be able to communicate it, right? Some people don't know how to do that quote unquote trick. And I think that comes from lack of people skills. Everything is done social media. Everything is done either with thumbs, voice text, or typing. Nothing is really done with voice anymore, with speaking. So you see facial expressions and mannerisms and your tonality and the person's posture and how they're reacting. Are they fidgeting? You see these things and you kind of get to test the temperature, take the temperature, check the temperature in that conversation. It's time for me to check out because this person's not paying attention. Or, okay, they're intrigued. We're at least engaging. Okay, we can keep going back and forth. And it's, again, sometimes the information that you have is information that I didn't have access to. That doesn't make your information wrong. It just means the information you have, I didn't know that. And I think a lot of people take that as, if you tell me something that I do not know, you are wrong because I didn't know that. And I've had conversations with folks literally on social media where they'll take the information that I told them, deny. Fuck around. I'm sure Google it, research it, ask other people. And then later on, you see them have a completely different conversation with somebody else who had the same viewpoint they did, but now they're arguing from my angle. It's like, wow, bro, you couldn't even give acknowledgement. Thank you for enlightening me. Thank you. Thank you for telling me what I didn't know. Thank you for good looking. I appreciate that. I didn't know that. That's weird. That changes how I see things. You couldn't even tell somebody that information. The common way for people nowadays, it seems, to ask questions is to argue with you. That seems to be the thing on social media. Is I got a banter going back and forth with you and argue with you and just have this intense conversation with you. And the more I deny, the more that makes you want to explain, and that's how some people learn, right? You say something like, I don't believe you. And they'll look at you. They'll kind of give you this look at the corner of their eye because they're waiting for you to start talking. They're waiting for you to sell them on something they have damn well no intention on buying. At least they don't want you to believe that they're going to buy it. And when the conversation is done, they're going to process it and they're going to replace what they thought was right with what you told them. And that's how they get educated. I always grew up, I'm going to ask the question. If I don't know, you're going to inform me. Now I know. Thank you very much for enlightening me. I appreciate it. People don't do that no more. I don't do conversations with folks like that. The moment they start doing shit like that, I'm quick to be like, all right, cool. You're right. I'm wrong. You're right. That makes so many people pissed off and so many people mad. It upsets so many individuals when you don't play around in the conversations like that. And they'll start calling you, you're a baby, you're immature, you're childish. It's like, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time wasting your time. If you're not buying what I'm selling, I'm going to back up the presentation and leave. There's no need to continue the conversation. And a lot of us, I feel, we do that. Again, it goes back to conversations when you're talking about sports. If someone is adamant, Michael Jordan's the best player, I don't care if Bill Russell has more championships. I never saw him watch. I never watched him play. So he's not the great. He ain't shit to me. Okay? If all time only means from 1985 to now, that's all. The 84 before doesn't matter. That doesn't count? Okay. So I ain't gonna waste my time with you. If you're having a conversation with someone about something at work and you try to give them a perspective of something that they were not aware of and they refuse to see that perspective, you know damn well any of the conversation is going to be so short-sighted with them. Why waste your time? Why waste your time? They know everything, especially the person who's never experienced it before. They know more than you. Those people I love. Insert sarcasm. I love those people because they make conversations so much fun, y'all. They really do. And then they correct you with what they think in their mind plays out to be right. And when they try to apply it and it doesn't work because something else is fucked up. This is why it doesn't work, because in my head, this is how it goes. And that just makes it right. It's no one wants to receive new information. But if you think like them, they'll believe you. Because obviously you know what you're talking about. You agree with me. When I was doing sales, they had there's 4 different personalities. There's a analytical Al. There's a busy Betty. There's a conservative Kathy and a know-it-all Dan. Somebody needs to see numbers. Somebody's always too busy, so it has to be their idea. Conservative, you got to watch your words. And know-it-all, hey, he knows everything. There's nothing you can tell him because he's got everything on lock, and that's just how it works. So you gotta know your audience when it comes to stuff like that. So anyway, this concludes the podcast for today, ladies and gentlemen. I want you guys to go out there and have a fantabulous week. The temperatures in Sacramento are supposed to be mid-high 90s, going into possibly triple digits. Well, we're going to see what the weather guessers say in the news and what the phone app says with the temperature. But I need you guys to do me a favor and just stay hydrated. Keep drinking water. Keep drinking those electrolytes. Make sure you get your proper rest as much as possible. Again, thank you for following the podcast, the E.I.T.H.R podcast. Tell a friend, tell a friend, and tell a friend. Again, if you guys are looking to expand your brand and need some help with promoting and promotional use, with, flyers, billboards, social media, podcasts, like a plug, like I've been doing for some people, just hit social media up, like GNS Promotions, and we'll get in contact with you. We'll make everything work for you. Again, social media, we got for the ether is at E.I.TH.R, Instagram and Twitter. I do sincerely appreciate everybody who is tuned in, who has been here for all 21 episodes now. Still getting the hang of it. I'm working on getting the webcam so we can go ahead and do this thing streaming. And right now I'm using my Beats headsets, so we're going to work on getting a microphone and everything set up too. So the quality is eventually going to sound a little bit different. But I'm just working with the best I can with what I got. So you guys enjoy your weekend, man. Stay cool, and we'll talk to you Monday, 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Hey, you guys be good.
What you know about the dopest dispensary in OKC with wheels? It's the only dispensary in OKC with wheels. Hot box delivery service. Discreet and dependable with all the biggest name brands and exotics, including Cookies, Backpack Boys, Jokes Up, Rap Packs, Baller Jars, Baller Bars, Carts, and more. Make sure you hit them up at 405-835-0222, 405-835-0222, 405-835-0222, hotboxdeliveryok.com.
State ascoltando il podcast E.I.T.H.R con E.I.T.H.R.